Alexander Sterling sat in his corner office on the 32nd floor, staring at the cream-colored invitation like it might burst into flames. The gold lettering seemed to mock him. Victoria Ashford and Richard Blackwell III request your presence at their engagement celebration. He read it again, hoping the words would somehow change. They didn't. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but he kept sipping it anyway. The bitter taste matched his mood perfectly. 3 months. That's all it had been since Victoria walked out of his life, taking her designer bags and her cutting words with her. "You care more about your computer screens than you do about me," she had said, throwing her engagement ring on his kitchen counter. "I need someone who actually shows up for life, not just board meetings." Alexander had wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong. But standing there in his expensive suit at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night, fresh from another late meeting, he realized he couldn't. When was the last time they'd had dinner without his phone buzzing? When had he last asked about her day without checking his emails at the same time? Now she was marrying Richard Blackwell, the same Richard who had tried to buy out Alexander's company 2 years ago. The same Richard who had called Alexander a workaholic with no life during their negotiations. The irony was almost too perfect. A knock on his office door saved him from spiraling deeper into his thoughts. Tyler, his assistant, poked his head in. Tyler was only 26, but he had this way of reading Alexander's moods that was both helpful and slightly annoying. "Boss, you've been staring at that invitation for 2 hours. Should I be worried?" Alexander looked up, realizing how pathetic he must seem. "It's Victoria's engagement party. This weekend." "Ah." Tyler stepped into the office and closed the door behind him. "The ex-fiancé who's marrying your business rival. And you're going because if I don't show up, every person in that room will think I'm hiding, that I'm some bitter ex who can't handle seeing her happy." Alexander rubbed his temples. "My biggest clients will be there. The mayor, half the city council. If I skip it, I look weak." Tyler nodded slowly. "But if you go alone, you look lonely, pathetic, like the workaholic she said I was." Alexander laughed, but there was no humor in it. "It's a lose-lose situation." "Not necessarily." Tyler sat down across from Alexander's desk. "What if you didn't go alone?" "I'm not dating anyone, Tyler. In case you haven't noticed, my social life died with my engagement." "Who says you have to be actually dating someone?" Tyler pulled out his phone and started typing. "There are services for this kind of thing. Professional, discreet. Think of it as hiring a consultant, but for your personal life." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting I hire a fake girlfriend?" "I'm suggesting you hire someone who can help you navigate a difficult social situation with confidence." Tyler turned his phone around, showing Alexander a website. "Look, these aren't sketchy escort services. These are educated professional people who specialize in corporate events and social functions." The website looked legitimate. Clean design, professional photos, testimonials from business executives who had used the service for various events. Alexander found himself actually considering it. "This is crazy," he said, but he was already reading the profiles Tyler had pulled up. "Crazy would be letting Victoria and Richard see you miserable. This is strategic." Tyler scrolled through the options. "Look at this one. Riley Brooks? She's an art curator and part-time actress. Master's degree in fine arts, speaks 3 languages. Says here she specializes in high-profile social events." Alexander looked at Riley's photo. She had warm brown eyes and a genuine smile that didn't look forced or fake like so many professional headshots. Her profile mentioned her work with local galleries and her passion for supporting emerging artists. She seemed real. "I can't believe I'm considering this," Alexander muttered. "You're considering it because it makes sense. You need to look successful and happy at this party. She needs work. It's a business transaction." Tyler paused. "Besides, what's the worst that could happen?" Alexander could think of about 50 things that could go wrong, but Tyler had a point. Showing up alone would be worse than showing up with someone who might not be perfect. "Fine. Set up a meeting. But if this backfires, I'm blaming you." Tyler grinned and started making the call. Within 20 minutes, he had arranged for Riley to come to Alexander's penthouse that evening for a consultation. Alexander spent the rest of the day trying to focus on work, but his mind kept wandering. What would he say to her? How did someone explain that they needed to rent a date because their ex-fiancé was marrying their business rival? and they couldn't bear to look pathetic in front of half the city's power players. At 7 o'clock, Alexander was pacing around his penthouse, checking his reflection in every mirror he passed. He had changed clothes twice, finally settling on jeans and a casual button-down shirt. He didn't want to look too formal for what was essentially a business meeting, but he also didn't want to look like he didn't care. The doorbell rang at exactly 7:15. When Alexander opened the door, he was struck by how different Riley looked from her photos. Not worse, just more alive. She had this energy about her that seemed to fill the space around her. "Alexander, I'm Riley Brooks." She extended her hand with a confident smile. "Tyler told me a little about your situation. Sounds like you need some backup for a tricky social event. That's one way to put it." Alexander stepped aside to let her in. "Can I get you something to drink? Coffee? Water?" "Coffee would be great, thanks." Riley looked around his penthouse, taking in the modern art on the walls and the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "This is beautiful. Do you collect contemporary art?" "Some. Mostly I just buy what looks good with the furniture." Alexander realized how shallow that sounded. "I mean, I appreciate art, I just don't know much about it." Riley walked over to a painting near his dining area. "This is a really interesting piece. The way the artist uses color to create depth is amazing. It must be nice to come home to something this inspiring after long days at work." Alexander looked at the painting he passed every day without really seeing. Through Riley's eyes, it did look different, more alive somehow. "So," Riley said, settling onto his couch with her coffee, "Tyler mentioned your ex-fiancé is marrying someone you have history with, and you need a date for their engagement party. That's gotta be tough." Her directness was refreshing. No dancing around the awkwardness of the situation. "It's complicated," Alexander said, sitting across from her. "Victoria and I were together for 2 years. She ended things because she said I was too focused on work. Now she's marrying Richard Blackwell, who happens to be someone I've had business conflicts with. The party is going to be full of people I work with, and I know they'll all be watching to see how I handle it." Riley nodded thoughtfully. "And you think showing up alone will make you look weak or bitter?" "Exactly. But showing up with someone might help you look like you've moved on and you're doing well. That's the idea." Riley was quiet for a moment, studying him. "Can I ask you something? Why does it matter so much what these people think?" The question caught Alexander off guard. "Because they're my clients, my business partners. Their opinion of me affects my company. But does it really? I mean, are they going to stop doing business with you because your ex-fiancé married someone else?" Alexander opened his mouth to say yes, then stopped. "Would they? Maybe not directly, but perception matters in business. If I look unstable or unsuccessful in my personal life, it reflects on my professional capabilities." Riley smiled. "That's interesting. In my world, artists are expected to have messy personal lives. It's almost seen as necessary for creativity." She set down her coffee cup. "But I get it. Different industries, different rules." They spent the next hour going over the details of the party. Who would be there? What kind of questions Riley might face, how long they would need to stay. Alexander found himself relaxing as they talked. Riley asked good questions and seemed genuinely interested in understanding the dynamics she'd be walking into. "One more thing," Riley said as they wrapped up. "What's our story? How did we meet? How long have we been dating?" Alexander realized they hadn't covered this crucial detail. "I don't know. What do you think?" "Well, it should be something believable but not too complicated. Maybe we met at a gallery opening. I was there for work. You were there supporting a client's charity event. We started talking about art, hit it off, and have been seeing each other for about a month. Long enough to bring me to an important event, but not so long that people will wonder why they haven't heard about me before." It was perfect, simple, believable, and it played to both their backgrounds. "That works," Alexander said. "And Riley? Thanks for not making this feel as weird as I thought it would." Riley smiled as she gathered her things. "Alexander, I've done events with tech CEOs, politicians, and even a guy who owned 3 circus companies. Trust me, this is pretty normal." She paused at the door. "Besides, you seem like a decent guy who's just trying to get through a difficult situation with some dignity." "I can work with that." After she left, Alexander realized he was actually looking forward to the party for the first time since he'd received the invitation. Maybe Tyler was right. Maybe this wasn't so crazy after all. Alexander adjusted his tie for the 5th time as his car pulled up to the Blackwell mansion. The grand estate looked like something out of a fairy tale, with thousands of tiny lights wrapped around every tree and column. Red carpet stretched from the circular driveway to the massive front doors, and he could see photographers positioned along the sides like paparazzi at a movie premiere. "This is it," he said, more to himself than to Riley. Riley looked out the window at the spectacle before them. She was wearing a stunning emerald green dress that made her eyes sparkle, and her hair was styled in soft waves that framed her face perfectly. But what struck Alexander most was how calm she seemed. While his palms were sweating, she looked like she attended events like this every weekend. "Wow, they really went all out," Riley said, watching a couple pose for photos near the entrance. Victoria must have wanted this to be the event of the year. "She always did love being the center of attention," Alexander muttered, then caught himself. "Sorry, I shouldn't talk about her like that." Riley turned to look at him. "Alexander, it's okay to feel however you feel about this. Just because we're pretending to be dating doesn't mean you have to pretend you're not human." The valet approached their car, and Alexander took a deep breath. "Ready?" "Born ready," Riley said with a confident smile that somehow made Alexander feel braver. The car door opened, and Alexander stepped out first, immediately hearing the soft click of camera shutters. He walked around to Riley's side and offered his hand as she emerged from the car. The moment she stood up, the clicking became more rapid. Riley's smile was radiant but natural, and she moved with the kind of grace that made it impossible to look away. "Mr. Sterling," called out a reporter from the local society magazine. "Who's your lovely companion tonight?" Alexander felt his throat tighten, but Riley squeezed his hand gently and stepped forward. "I'm Riley Brooks," she said warmly. "It's wonderful to be here celebrating Victoria and Richard's engagement." The reporter scribbled notes while photographers captured every angle. Riley answered a few more questions, with perfect responses that revealed just enough to be interesting but not enough to seem like she was trying to steal attention from the engaged couple. As they walked up the red carpet, Alexander marveled at how effortlessly Riley handled everything. She waved to photographers when appropriate, paused for pictures when asked, but never lingered too long or tried to hog the spotlight. "You're really good at this," he whispered as they approached the entrance. "I told you. I've done this before," she whispered back. "Just follow my lead and try to look like you're having fun." The inside of the mansion was even more impressive than the outside. Crystal chandeliers hung from 20-foot ceilings, and fresh flowers decorated every surface. Waiters in black suits carried trays of champagne and fancy appetizers that Alexander couldn't pronounce. Classical music played softly in the background, mixed with the sound of conversation and laughter. Alexander scanned the room, recognizing faces from board meetings, charity events, and business dinners. These were the people whose opinions could make or break deals worth millions of dollars. His stomach nodded as he realized how many eyes were already on him and Riley. "Alexander, darling." He turned to see Victoria approaching them, looking stunning in a white cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her smile was perfect, but Alexander could see the calculation behind her eyes as she studied Riley. "Victoria," Alexander said, forcing his own smile. "Congratulations. You look beautiful." "Thank you." Victoria's gaze shifted to Riley, and Alexander could practically see her sizing up the competition. "And you must be Riley Brooks." Riley extended her hand with genuine warmth. "Congratulations on your engagement. Alexander has told me wonderful things about you." Alexander blinked in surprise. He definitely hadn't said wonderful things about Victoria, but Riley's tone was so sincere that even he almost believed it. Victoria shook Riley's hand, her smile becoming slightly more forced.
"How lovely!"
"And how did you two meet?" "At a gallery opening downtown," Riley said without missing a beat. "Alexander was there supporting one of his clients' charity events, and I was there for work. We started talking about the art, and—" She looked at Alexander with such convincing affection that his heart actually skipped. "Well, one thing led to another." "How romantic," Victoria said, but her tone suggested she found it anything but romantic. "I didn't know you were interested in art." "Alexander, there's a lot you didn't know about me," Alexander replied, surprised by the confidence in his own voice. Before Victoria could respond, a tall man with perfectly styled blonde hair appeared at her side. Richard Blackwell looked exactly like what he was. Old money, expensive education, and the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about anything. "Alex, good to see you," Richard said, extending his hand. Alexander noticed he used Alex instead of Alexander, a small power play that didn't go unnoticed. "Richard, congratulations." Alexander shook his hand firmly. "And this must be your date," Richard said, turning to Riley with obvious interest. "Riley Brooks," she said, shaking his hand. "What a beautiful home you have. The art collection is incredible." Richard's face lit up. "You appreciate art? How wonderful. Most people here just see expensive decorations." Alexander watched as Richard launched into a detailed explanation of a painting, visible from where they stood. Riley listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that made Richard beam with pride. Victoria's smile grew more strained with each passing minute. "The use of light in this piece reminds me of some contemporary works I've seen," Riley said. "There's an emerging artist in the downtown district who uses similar techniques, but with a more modern perspective. Her name is Christina Vale. You might enjoy her work." "I'll have to look her up," Richard said enthusiastically. "It's so rare to meet someone who truly understands art beyond its monetary value." Alexander glanced at Victoria, who was clearly not enjoying being ignored in favor of a discussion about paintings. "Well," Victoria said loudly, "I should introduce you both to some of our other guests. Richard, darling, didn't you want to show Alexander your new business acquisition?" "Actually," Richard said, still focused on Riley, "I'd love to hear more about this Christina Vale artist. Are you in the art world professionally?" "I'm a curator at the Riverside Gallery downtown," Riley explained. "I work with a lot of emerging artists, helping them get their first shows and connect with collectors." "Fascinating," Richard said. "You know, we're always looking for interesting pieces for our corporate offices. Perhaps we could—" "Richard," Victoria interrupted, her voice sharper now. "Don't you think we should mingle with our other guests?" Riley seemed to sense the tension and smoothly redirected the conversation. "Of course you two should enjoy your party. Thank you for including us in your celebration." As Victoria practically dragged Richard away, Alexander heard her whisper urgently in his ear. He couldn't make out the words, but her tone was definitely not happy. "Well, that was interesting," Alexander said once they were out of earshot. "She doesn't like competition," Riley observed, "and she really doesn't like that her fiancé is interested in talking to me about something she probably knows nothing about." Over the next hour, Alexander watched in amazement as Riley worked the room like a professional diplomat. She remembered names, asked about people's children and businesses, and somehow made everyone feel like the most interesting person at the party. When they encountered Mrs. Davidson, the elderly philanthropist who funded half the city's cultural events, Riley immediately recognized her and thanked her for her support of the arts community. Mrs. Davidson was so charmed that she invited Riley to a private gallery viewing. The following week at the dinner table, Riley was seated next to James Morrison, a tech entrepreneur who had been trying to get a meeting with Alexander for months. Instead of talking business, Riley asked James about his daughter's college plans and his wife's pottery hobby. By the end of the meal, James was laughing more than Alexander had ever seen him laugh, and he had extended an invitation for Alexander and Riley to join his family for dinner the following weekend. "You're magic," Alexander whispered to Riley as they moved to the dance floor. "I'm just interested in people," she replied. "Most folks at events like this spend all their time trying to impress everyone else. If you actually listen to what people are saying and care about their answers, they remember you." As they danced, Alexander found himself forgetting that this was supposed to be fake. Riley felt natural in his arms, and their conversation flowed easily from topic to topic. She told him about the gallery where she worked, and her dream of eventually opening her own space focused on supporting artists from underrepresented communities. He found himself sharing his own forgotten dreams of using technology to solve real problems instead of just making money. "You know," Riley said as the song ended, "you're different than I expected." "Different how?" "More human," she said simply. "Tyler made you sound like this serious business robot, but you're actually funny and thoughtful. Victoria must have been crazy to let you go." Alexander felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the champagne. For the first time in months, he felt like someone actually saw him as more than just a successful CEO or a failed fiancé. The evening was going better than he had dared to hope. But as he looked across the room and saw Victoria watching them with barely concealed irritation, Alexander realized that tomorrow's gossip columns were going to be very interesting indeed. As the evening progressed, Alexander began to notice something strange happening. For the first time in months, maybe even years, he was actually enjoying himself at a social event. Usually, these gatherings felt like work, requiring him to put on a performance and say all the right things to all the right people. But with Riley by his side, everything felt different. It wasn't just that she was beautiful or charming, though she was definitely both. It was the way she made everyone around her feel important and heard. Alexander watched her talk to people he had known for years, and somehow she brought out sides of them he had never seen before. When they approached the appetizer table, Riley struck up a conversation with Carol, one of the catering staff who was refilling the shrimp display. While other guests barely acknowledged the help, Riley asked Carol about the beautiful presentation and complimented her work. Carol's face lit up as she explained how she had arranged the food to look like flowers, and Riley listened like it was the most fascinating thing she had ever heard. "You have a real artist's eye," Riley told her. "The way you've used the colors and shapes is brilliant." Alexander had walked past that same display 3 times without really seeing it. But now, through Riley's eyes, he could see how much thought and creativity had gone into something most people would barely notice. "She's right," Alexander found himself saying to Carol. "It really is beautiful work." Carol beamed and thanked them both before hurrying off to check on other displays. Alexander realized he felt good about that small interaction in a way he hadn't felt good about anything in a long time. "You see beauty everywhere, don't you?" he asked Riley as they moved away from the table. "Don't you?" she asked back. "I mean, look around. Yes, this is a fancy party with expensive everything, but there are also real people here with real stories. Like Carol, who probably got up at 4 in the morning to make sure everything looked perfect. Or that man over there by the piano who keeps checking his phone because his daughter is at her first school dance tonight, and he wants to make sure she's okay." Alexander looked where Riley was pointing and saw David Chen, a business associate he had known for 5 years. He had never noticed that David was the type to worry about his kids or even that he had kids. "How do you know that?" Alexander asked. Riley smiled. "I asked him. People love talking about the things that matter to them. You just have to actually listen." They were interrupted by a stern voice behind them. "Riley Brooks, isn't it?" They turned to see Dorothy Whitmore, the city's most feared arts patron. Dorothy was in her 70s with silver hair pulled back in a perfect bun and a reputation for making grown museum directors cry. She had never spoken more than 10 words to Alexander, despite his numerous attempts to get her attention for business purposes. "Mrs. Whitmore," Riley said with genuine respect, "what an honor to meet you. Your support for the arts community is legendary." Dorothy studied Riley with sharp blue eyes. "And what exactly do you do in the arts community, my dear?" "I'm a curator at the Riverside Gallery. We focus primarily on emerging artists who might not otherwise get the chance to show their work." "Emerging artists," Dorothy repeated, her tone suggesting she had strong opinions about emerging artists. "And what makes you think these unknowns deserve gallery space?" Alexander tensed, sensing this could go badly, but Riley remained calm and confident. "Because every artist who changes the world starts as an unknown," Riley said simply. "Van Gogh sold 1 painting in his lifetime. Picasso was rejected by art schools. Sometimes the most important voices are the ones no one is listening to yet." Dorothy raised an eyebrow. "Interesting perspective. Tell me about one of these emerging artists you're so passionate about." Riley's face lit up. "There's this incredible painter named Maya Rodriguez. She's a single mother who works night shifts at a hospital and paints during the day while her kids are at school. Her work explores themes of sacrifice and hope through these amazing abstract pieces that somehow capture exactly what it feels like to be struggling but not giving up." As Riley described Maya's work, her passion was so evident that even Dorothy seemed drawn in. Alexander found himself hanging on every word, amazed by how Riley could make him care about someone he had never met. "Where can I see this Maya's work?" Dorothy asked. "She has 3 pieces in our current show at Riverside Gallery. The exhibition runs through next month." Dorothy nodded slowly. "I may stop by." Coming from Dorothy Whitmore, that was practically a rave review. As Dorothy walked away, Alexander stared at Riley in amazement. "Do you realize what just happened?" Dorothy Whitmore hasn't spoken to me once in 5 years of trying, and she just had a 10-minute conversation with you about art. She's not that scary, Riley said. She just cares deeply about art and gets frustrated when people treat it like a commodity instead of something meaningful. You made her care about a painter she's never seen. No, she already cared. I just gave her a reason to act on it. The band began playing a slow song and couples started moving toward the dance floor. Alexander offered Riley his hand, and as they began to dance, he found himself studying her face in the soft light. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course. Why do you do this? The fake date thing, I mean. You're clearly intelligent and talented. You could probably make more money doing something else." Riley was quiet for a moment as they swayed to the music. "Honestly, sometimes I need the money. Gallery work doesn't pay much, and I'm trying to save up to start my own space someday. But also," she looked up at him, "I like helping people. Most of the men who hire me aren't bad guys. They're just in situations where they need someone in their corner for a few hours. And after tonight, they probably all fall a little bit in love with you." Riley smiled. "That's not really the point. The point is to help them get through whatever they're facing." "What am I facing?" Alexander asked. "I think you're facing the realization that you've been living a life that doesn't really fit you anymore." Her words hit him harder than he expected. "What do you mean? You seem surprised every time someone at this party shows you kindness or genuine interest. Like you've forgotten that people can actually like you for who you are, not just what you can do for them." Alexander thought about that as they continued dancing. When was the last time someone had enjoyed his company without wanting something from him? When had he last felt like himself instead of like Alexander Sterling, CEO? "Victoria used to say I was boring," he admitted. "That I never talked about anything except work." "What did you used to talk about before work took over your life?" Alexander had to think about that. "I used to love science fiction movies. I wanted to write stories when I was a kid. I used to think about how technology could solve big problems, not just make money. Those don't sound boring to me." Victoria thought they were childish. Victoria sounds like she never really knew you. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the bar. Victoria's voice rose above the general chatter, and Alexander could tell she was upset about something. He and Riley moved closer to see what was happening. "I just think it's interesting," Victoria was saying to a small group of people, "how some people will do anything for money these days, like showing up to parties as someone's hired companion and pretending to be something they're not." The group shifted uncomfortably, clearly understanding that Victoria was talking about Riley. Alexander felt anger surge through him like he hadn't felt in years. But before he could say anything, Riley stepped forward with a calm smile. "You know, Victoria, you're absolutely right," Riley said loudly enough for the entire group to hear. "People do all sorts of things for money. Some people marry for it. Some people build companies for it, and some people provide companionship for social events. The difference is being honest about what you're doing and why." The group stared at Riley in stunned silence. Victoria's face flushed red. "I wasn't," Victoria started. "Of course you weren't," Riley said gently. "You're getting married for love, and that's beautiful. Everyone should be so lucky to find someone who makes them happy." She looked around the group with genuine warmth. "Now, who wants to hear about the amazing catering team who made all this gorgeous food? I was just talking to Carol, and the artistry that went into this presentation is incredible." Just like that, Riley had deflected Victoria's attack, made her look petty, and redirected the conversation to something positive. The group eagerly followed her lead, grateful for an escape from the awkward moment. Alexander watched Victoria storm off toward Richard, who was still standing by the art display where Riley had left him an hour earlier, probably still thinking about contemporary paintings. "You didn't have to defend yourself," Alexander said quietly to Riley. "I wasn't defending myself," Riley replied. "I was defending the truth. And besides, she wasn't really attacking me. She was attacking you through me." "What do you mean?" "She's angry that you look happy. That you're here with someone who clearly adores you and brings out the best in you. It makes her question her own choices." "You don't adore me," Alexander said. "This is just a job." Riley looked at him for a long moment. "Is it?" she asked softly. Before Alexander could figure out how to answer that question, a woman with a press badge approached them. "Excuse me, aren't you Alexander Sterling? I'm Jennifer Walsh from Business Weekly. Could I get a quick interview? Alexander's first instinct was to say no, but Riley squeezed his hand encouragingly. We'd be happy to, Riley said. Jennifer pulled out her phone to record. Mr. Sterling, your company has been making headlines lately with your environmental initiatives. What inspired this new direction? Alexander glanced at Riley, who nodded encouragingly. I think I finally remembered why I started my company in the first place, Alexander said. It wasn't just to make money. It was to create technology that could actually help people and solve real problems. Sometimes it takes meeting someone who sees the world differently to remind you of your own values. And Riley, what do you think about Alexander's work? I think Alexander is the kind of person who changes things for the better, Riley said without hesitation. His environmental programs are going to help so many communities, and his mentorship initiatives for young entrepreneurs are creating opportunities for people who might not otherwise get them. He's not just successful in business. He's successful at being human. Alexander stared at Riley as she spoke. She was describing programs he had barely paid attention to, initiatives his company had started that he had delegated to other people, but hearing her talk about them, he remembered why he had approved them in the first place. After Jennifer left, Alexander and Riley found themselves alone on a quiet balcony overlooking the gardens. Thank you, Alexander said. For what? For making me remember who I used to be, and for showing me who I could be again, Riley smiled. The night's not over yet. But Alexander was already beginning to suspect that when this night did end, he wasn't going to want to say goodbye to the woman who had reminded him how to see the world. Through kinder eyes, Alexander woke up to sunlight streaming through his bedroom windows and the sound of his phone buzzing nonstop on the nightstand. He squinted at the clock. 9:30 in the morning. When was the last time he had slept past 7 on a weekday? He felt surprisingly good, considering he hadn't gotten home until almost 2 in the morning. The events of the previous night came flooding back as he reached for his phone. The party, Victoria's jealous comments, Riley's grace under pressure, and that moment on the balcony when he had felt more like himself than he had in years. He smiled, remembering how Riley had laughed at his terrible jokes and how natural it had felt to have her hand in his. His phone screen showed dozens of missed calls, text messages, and notifications. Tyler had sent him at least 15 messages, all variations of "Boss, you need to see this and check the news now." Alexander grabbed his laptop and opened his browser. The first thing that popped up was a photo of him and Riley walking into the party together. Riley looked absolutely stunning, and Alexander was surprised to see that he looked happy. Really happy. Not the forced smile he usually wore at business events, but genuine joy. The headline read, "Mystery Woman Steals Show at Ashford Blackwell Engagement Party." Alexander scrolled down and found more photos from throughout the evening. Riley talking to Dorothy Whitmore. Riley and Alexander dancing. Riley charming Richard while Victoria watched with obvious frustration. He clicked on another article from the city's most popular gossip blog. Who was Riley Brooks? The art curator who made everyone forget about the bride-to-be. The article went on to describe Riley as elegant, intelligent, and genuinely warm, and mentioned how she had effortlessly connected with everyone from society matrons to catering staff. But it was the business section that really caught Alexander's attention. Sterling Tech CEO shows personal growth at high-profile event. The article discussed how relaxed and confident Alexander had appeared, and how his mystery companion had seemed to bring out a more personable side of him. Several business contacts were quoted saying they were impressed with Alexander's renewed energy and obvious happiness. His phone rang, interrupting his reading. Tyler's name flashed on the screen. Have you seen it? Tyler asked without preamble. I'm looking at it now, Alexander said, scrolling through more photos. This is incredible, amazing, the best thing that could have happened, Tyler supplied. Boss, our stock price is up 3% this morning. 3%. Because investors think you look stable and happy. Alexander stared at his laptop screen. You're kidding. I never kid about stock prices. Also, you have 7 new meeting requests from potential clients who were at the party last night. They all specifically mentioned how impressed they were with you and Riley. Alexander found himself smiling. Really? David Chen wants to discuss that environmental tech project he's been trying to get off the ground. Dorothy Whitmore's assistant called asking about sponsorship opportunities for arts programs. And get this, Richard Blackwell's office called wanting to discuss potential partnerships. Richard called? Alexander couldn't believe it. Apparently, he was very impressed with Riley's knowledge of contemporary art and wanted to know if you'd be interested in consulting on some cultural investments. Tyler paused. Boss, I don't know what you two did last night, but it worked better than we could have hoped. After Tyler hung up, Alexander sat in his bed, staring at the photos on his laptop. There was one of him and Riley talking to Dorothy Whitmore, and Alexander could see his own face in the background. He looked interested, engaged, alive. When was the last time he had looked like that in photos? He scrolled through more coverage, finding mentions in 3 different society blogs, 2 business publications, and even a lifestyle magazine. Every single article painted Riley in a positive light and, by extension, made Alexander look good too. But as he read about their whirlwind romance and obvious chemistry, Alexander felt something twist in his stomach. It wasn't real. None of it was real. Riley had been paid to be there, paid to make him look good, paid to pretend she cared about him, except it hadn't felt like pretending. Without really thinking about it, Alexander found Riley's number in his phone and called her. She answered on the second ring. Well, if it isn't the man of the hour, Riley said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. I take it you've seen the coverage? Some of it. Riley, I don't know how to thank you. This is incredible. You don't need to thank me. I had a wonderful time last night. You did? Alexander asked, surprised by how much her answer mattered to him. Of course I did. You're much more interesting than you give yourself credit for, Alexander Sterling. Alexander found himself relaxing into the conversation. Tyler says our stock price is up and half the party wants to do business with me now. That's fantastic. Although I have to say I'm not surprised. You were different last night, more yourself. What do you mean? I mean, you stopped trying so hard to be the perfect CEO and just let yourself be human. People respond to authenticity. They talked for another hour about the party, the photos, and the positive response. Alexander found himself sharing things he never discussed with anyone, like how lonely he had been since Victoria left and how much pressure he felt to always have the right answer for everything. You know, Riley said during a pause in their conversation, I meant what I said last night about Victoria not really knowing you. The man I spent the evening with is funny, kind, and genuinely interested in making the world better. That's not boring. Victoria always said I was too serious, that I never wanted to do anything fun. What's fun for you? Riley asked. Alexander had to think about that. I used to love going to museums. I know that sounds boring, but I love seeing how artists and inventors throughout history solved problems. I used to spend hours in the Science Museum as a kid, imagining what kinds of inventions could help people. That doesn't sound boring at all. It sounds like someone who sees possibilities everywhere. What about you? What do you do for fun? I love discovering new artists. There's this amazing feeling when you see someone's work for the first time, and you just know they're going to change how people think about art. It's like finding treasure. Alexander smiled. You sound like you really love what you do. I do, but it's not always easy. The gallery where I work is great, but it's small and we don't have much budget for promoting new artists. I have this dream of opening my own space someday, somewhere that could really support emerging talent. What would you need for something like that? Riley was quiet for a moment. Honestly, a location is the biggest challenge. Rent in the arts district is incredibly expensive, and most landlords want established galleries with proven track records. Alexander found himself thinking about the unused space on the ground floor of his company's headquarters. It had been designed as a lobby gallery, but they had never done anything with it except hang a few expensive paintings that no one really looked at. What if I told you I might know of a space? He said before he could stop himself. What do you mean? This is going to change my life, Christina told Riley, tears in her eyes. I can actually call myself a professional artist now. Alexander watched Riley hug the young woman, and he felt something shift in his chest. This was what mattered, not stock prices or business deals or impressing people at fancy parties. This moment when someone's dreams came true because Riley had believed in them and fought for them. As the last guests left around 10 o'clock, Alexander and Riley found themselves alone in the gallery, surrounded by the red dots that marked sold pieces and the satisfied smiles of artists who had experienced their first taste of professional success. I can't believe it, Riley said. sinking into one of the chairs they had brought in for the reception. 9 sales, 9. You did this, Alexander said, sitting beside her. You made this happen. We made this happen. Alexander, I could never have done this without you. The space, the support, the way you helped tonight. She turned to face him fully. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. Riley, working with you these past 3 weeks has been the best part of my year, maybe the best part of the last few years. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both looking around at what they had accomplished together. Can I tell you something? Riley said quietly. Anything. That night at Victoria's party when I first met you, I thought you were just another lonely businessman who needed someone to make him look good at a social event. Alexander winced. That's pretty much what I was. No, you weren't. I realized it as soon as we started talking. You were someone who had forgotten who he really was underneath all the pressure and expectations. Riley reached for his hand. These past 3 weeks, watching you remember that person, seeing you get excited about supporting artists and making a difference, it's been amazing. Riley, I have to tell you something too. What? Alexander took a deep breath. I hired you because I was embarrassed about showing up alone to my ex-fiance's engagement party. I thought if I could just get through one evening without looking pathetic, everything would go back to normal. And did it? Go back to normal? No. Nothing has been normal since that night. You changed everything. Alexander turned to face her completely. You made me remember what it feels like to be excited about life. You showed me that success means more than just making money. You made me want to be the kind of person who deserves someone like you. Riley's eyes were bright as she listened. The truth is, Alexander continued, I've been in love with you since that night on the balcony when you told me I was more than just a successful CEO. And spending these weeks with you, building something together, it's only made me more sure. Alexander, I know this started as a business arrangement. I know you were just doing your job. But somewhere along the way it stopped feeling like pretending and started feeling like the most real thing in my life. Riley was quiet for a long moment, and Alexander felt his heart pounding as he waited for her response. You want to know a secret? She finally said. What? I've never had to pretend with you, not once. From that first conversation in your penthouse, everything I felt was real. The way you listened to me, the way you supported my dreams, the way you see possibilities in everything. She squeezed his hand. I fell in love with you somewhere between the red carpet and the dance floor that first night. Alexander felt like he could barely breathe. Really? Really? And these past 3 weeks working with you, seeing how much you care about making a difference, watching you find joy in helping other people succeed. Riley smiled. Alexander, you're not the man who hired a fake date anymore. You're the man who believes in dreams and makes them come true. Alexander leaned forward and kissed her, and it felt like coming home to a life he never knew he wanted. When they finally pulled apart, Riley laughed softly. What? Alexander asked. I was just thinking about Victoria's face when she realizes that her engagement party was where you met the love of your life. Alexander grinned. Should we send her a thank you card? Maybe we should invite her to our wedding. The word hung in the air between them, and Alexander felt his heart race with possibility. Is that a proposal? He asked. Maybe it's a preview, Riley said, her eyes sparkling. Ask me again in a few months when you're sure this isn't just the excitement of a successful art opening. Riley Brooks. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Then ask me again in a few months anyway. I want to say yes when I'm wearing something prettier than paint-splattered clothes. Alexander laughed and pulled her close, looking around at the gallery that had brought them together. What had started as a desperate plan to save face at his ex's party had become the beginning of the most authentic relationship of his life. 6 months later, the society pages would feature another announcement involving Alexander Sterling. But this time, it wouldn't be about business deals or stock prices. It would be about a CEO who found love when he stopped trying to impress people and started being himself. And an artist who taught him that the best partnerships are built on making each other's dreams come true. The fake date had become the real deal, proving that sometimes the most unexpected arrangements can lead to the most genuine happiness.